This is KDXI St. George, Radio St. George at 100.3 FM. It's now time for tips, topics, issues, and positions. And now your host for tips, Dr. Bob Oxley.
Hello, everybody. Bob Oxley here for tips. Welcome back. And today we're going to talk about this word called impeachment. It seems to be in the news over the last week. And our President Donald Trump is being investigated as far as collusion and working with the Ukrainian President Zelensky. And we have a whistleblower that's involved, and I've invited back two experts. You are familiar with who they are, but here they are again. It's Professor Joe Green and Dr. Chip McLeod. How are you doing, guys?
Hello.
We're back, and here we are talking politics again, and that wonderful word called impeachment.
It's Friday, right?
It's Friday, okay. Yeah. So it's been quite a week. I guess it's been so exhausting that Congress is taking 2 weeks off, the next 2 weeks off. So it gives an opportunity to recoup and talk about this thing, impeachment, and some of the specifics that have come out this week. But before we get started, we always start off with just the basics. What is this thing called impeachment? How serious is it? And we'll move from there. How's that? So who wants to start and give us a little bit of an education on impeachment?
Well, it's one of the most serious things the House of Representatives can do. Which is why, if anybody saw Nancy Pelosi's, I think this was yesterday perhaps, she began talking about that. I think it was on the Morning Joe show. And it turned into a very interesting little history lesson. She worked in Benjamin Franklin and all kinds of people. But the simple big picture response to this is it's a very, very powerful component of what the House of Representatives can do per the Constitution. And then it gets kind of complicated.
Wow. Joe, do you have anything to add to that?
Actually, what we've got here isn't impeachment the way that it has been done the three times that they've actually gone through it. In those instances, the whole House had to vote to start an impeachment investigation and assign a committee in the House to do it. They always assign the Judiciary Committee. In this instance, Mr. Nadler, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, has been doing impeachment-like hearings, inquiry, he calls it. He says there's not a legal difference. I don't know if it's an absolute House rule that the whole House has to vote, or if it's just traditional way they've done it. But so far, there has not been a House vote to open an impeachment inquiry, and that's part of the politics involved in this.
Well, if we're going there, let's make this as complicated as it really is. There are 6 committees that are working on this, various aspects of it, and you began with a question about impeachment per se, which is what I heard. And again, Joe is exactly right. The last thing that was mentioned, and I don't know where the head count resides now, but impeachment per se is largely a political remedy for wrongdoing. If we talked about that once before, and impeachment is something handled by the House of Representatives if they ever get there, and they need 218 votes to basically officially charge you with some wrongdoing, and then there are so many things, and I think I was kidding the last time, but I once again called it I'll use the word awesome, that's popular. It's an awesome power of the House of Representatives, because not that our politicians and leaders would get quite this silly, but if you could get a 218 vote to impeach on an article of impeachment that Donald Trump's red ties are way too long, you would be impeached.
Wow.
We need to clarify, too, that impeachment just means to bring charges
right.
that requires a trial. The trial would be held in the Senate. The Senate would have to convict by a 2/3 vote in order for anything to happen. So,
and perhaps we'll talk about the various nuances of that, because there are the rules, the regulations, what these people have up their sleeves and what they're seemingly attempting to do on any given day. But there is something of a divide between common sense, practical folks who argue that, okay, go ahead with this if you think you have impeachable offenses. And they have a little list that they've been trying. And now we have a new one, they think. So what is it you're really doing? There are Democrats who are telling the tale that we need to go through with this because we're principled legislators and there's a huge problem here that falls under the umbrella of a likely impeachment of our president. Then there are other practical folks who argue that, okay, go ahead and do that. You'll never get 67 senators, because the Senate's full of Republicans, to vote to convict this man. So the question is, why are you doing this? And they have lots of answers for that.
Yeah, you want to? Shall we get right into it?
We can go wherever you want.
I want to start going. So what we're talking about is, and I'm going to do a generalization here, and you guys can pick up from that. But our president supposedly contacted the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, and they have a transcript of that discussion on the phone. And they're insinuating, based on the transcript, that the president kind of said, I told the State Department to hold X numbers of millions of dollars in aid to the Ukraine, and we've always been a good friend of yours. Now, we can release that money for you, but you got to do me a favor, and I want you to investigate Joe Biden's son. And if you can help me out on that, because I know you had a good prosecutor there, and some people paid to get rid of him. And so if you do that for me, then I'll release the funds for you from the State Department. And that's a generalization.
Yeah, that came from a whistleblower.
That sure did.
Someone in the CIA.
They think, yeah.
Well, they've identified him as this person who's in the CIA who was assigned to the White House. However, the person evidently didn't have direct knowledge of the phone call and had not seen the transcript, but evidently was talking to people who had seen or heard the phone call or the transcript. But we got to be careful here, because the United States government does not record phone calls between the president and foreign leaders. President Obama got in a little bit of trouble because that was happening. So there isn't a recording that we can go back to and look. What they do is they have two CIA analysts listen to the call and then go back and write up notes, compare notes, and that's the transcript. So it's not a word-for-word transcript that we're dealing with in the course of this.
In my little bit of research on this, to the nuts and bolts, which is, we were discussing this before we started the show, much of what we say, if not everything, could change radically about 14 seconds after we're off the air. That's the way it's working. But in these phone calls, there are usually as many as 8 to 10 to 12 people actually listening to them. Almost never is anyone in the room with the president. Sometimes they're all over the compound. They're in different rooms, sometimes in different buildings. And as Joe just said, if you want to sit down and compare that transcript with what was actually said verbatim on a tape, you can't, because there is no tape. So this is an approximation of what somebody, the whistleblower, got upset about, that he thought he understood to be happening. And you can, I think it's the Wall Street Journal, some other outlets as well, are offering bits and pieces now that it's out. You can read it and take a look at it, but we're not talking about a usual form of transcription where an expert sits there and listens to a tape and transcribes it. That didn't happen.
I got the other information. I've got information that the president and his staff actually stored, and I thought it was recorded, in some kind of a secret vault.
No, they stored the transcript in a vault that is for special business and that sort of thing. Since you brought that up, the immediate assumption when that got out was that this must be politically damaging, which is why they put it there. And so once again, we're off to the races.
Yeah, that would be the transcript. Evidently, in the transcript that we have, President Trump does not mention the aid. That's not in it, but he does. Is it 7 times? Eight times. Ask Zelensky to investigate the firing of the prosecutor investigating their natural gas company, for whom Hunter Biden was working as a member of the board of directors.
Okay. So, one misunderstanding, and I think the general public, a lot of people are the same impression as I did, that there was a tape and it was put in some vault somebody, but it's just a transcript. That's number one.
And in fact, the transcript is largely, I'm not sure how much or to what extent they rely on these people's memories, but it's basically taken from notes.
Yeah.
Then they put it together.
They write a memo, but it's not an absolute quote of President Trump said X. It's what these two people have remembered and edited together, as that becomes the transcript.
And that's what was released to Congress yesterday.
That's what you can read.
All right, now with the phone conversations continuing with Zelensky, the president brought up Attorney General Barr. He also brought up a number of times his personal attorney Giuliani, and put them in contact with the president of the Ukraine. What is all that about? I mean, why would he do that?
Mr. Giuliani evidently has been assigned by the president to investigate interference in the 2016 election by people in Ukraine where we can get to. We can't get to the people in Russia and so on. But Mr. Giuliani is going on air wherever he can go on the air and claiming that he's discovered documents that Hunter Biden was, we know Hunter Biden was getting paid about $50,000 to be on the board of this gas company, that he got the job while Vice President Biden was vice president, that he knew virtually nothing about energy, that kind of thing. So it doesn't look good for the vice president and his campaign. And he's also brought up the charge that Hunter Biden rode on the president's official airplane to China and somehow came back with $1 billion in investment funds for a hedge fund that I'm not clear on this. Hunter Biden doesn't have a lot of experience in hedge funds either. So Giuliani wants to make the claim that there's deep corruption in the Biden family, and the main problem with that is that Mr. Biden is on tape claiming that he told the Ukrainians before this new guy was elected to fire the prosecutor who was looking into the corruption in this gas company that Hunter Biden's on the board of, and if the prosecutor is investigating that, so the implication is that somehow Hunter Biden would be implicated in that too, and that Vice President Biden says, fire him or you don't get $1 billion in military aid that we're going to give you. But there's no evidence at all that Hunter Biden was being investigated. What I've heard is that this prosecutor was being accused by numerous European groups of not moving quickly enough in his investigation, and that was sort of the reason. But it does not look good for the former vice president in all of this. So.
But no, he's on. They keep playing the same tape or presenting it on several media outlets. It's about a minute, and Biden is on the stage with a couple people talking about the fact that he's telling them he was, what did he visited Ukraine 12, 13 times himself, and he was admonishing them very seriously to fire this person, or here's $1 billion you're not going to get. In fact, the story he's telling is that it was 6 hours before he got on the plane, and he said, okay, here's the deal. Either do it or we're in big trouble. That is you're not getting the money. And evidently that's the straw that broke the camel's back, according to Joe Biden. So.
My question was, though, Giuliani, why is he involved with this? Why is he?
Because the president sent him.
Well, and Giuliani claiming that the State Department gave him directions as to how to act and perform, or something like that, rules and regulations.
This is part of the Trump approach to everything, and the folks who are truly tapped into this pointed out immediately, which is this man is, for all practical purposes, Trump's personal lawyer. And so now he's involved in what is potentially another monumental Trumpian government scam and problem, and for some reason that escapes me, he keeps using Giuliani for this, because I don't recall, and the man's a lawyer. He was a highly placed politician at one time, and
mayor of New York.
Yes, he contradicts himself more in 30 seconds than most people on the hustings today. So, but that's Trump's approach. He likes these people because he thinks they're loyal.
Yeah. Let's take a look at it then. Really, what we're looking at as far as impeachment is some of the accusations or insinuations are that the president's using the office of the president of the United States for personal protection or gain as far as being reelected.
Yeah, and
that's the statement I heard.
Right. That's the position that the Democrats are taking, and it's the reason that this has Speaker Pelosi said this is I'll use, it's cliche now on straw that breaks the camel's back.
Right.
This puts it over the edge. This is why I'm on board with the impeachment inquiry that was already going on. That really, and the response from the other side. Now, I'm not sure what the other side is. The Republicans in the Senate voted, I think every one of them, to make sure that the transcript of this phone call is released.
It was unanimous, you're right.
Which suggests that maybe there's some backing off of whether they're going to support the president or, I mean, think of these people in the Senate. They've had to, based on partisan politics, support virtually everything that the president has done, some of it that they don't like, some of it they're embarrassed by. And my guess is there's a number of them who would look for reasons to back off, push away. So if it came to that, but the position on the other side is Mr. Trump had initiated this because he's worried about the corruption that came out of Ukraine and influenced our election in 2016. Somehow that was connected to the email, the Clinton email releases, something like that. And so his asking about investigating the gas company and so on is consistent with his concern about corruption. Therefore, there's no crime here. The opposite point of view is that Mr. Trump was going directly after one of his political opponents, his likely opponent in the next election based on the current polls, that's using a foreign government to interfere in the United States election. That's what the Mueller investigation was all about, that somehow Trump used foreign people to help interfere in the 2016 election.
And not that you need anybody to connect the dots, but the tag would be again.
Yeah. At least that's what the Democrats think. Yeah.
And we're going to get you this time. And what we were discussing for a moment a few minutes ago was now there's this package of possible impeachable offenses that some of the sources regale us with from time to time, and people seem to have forgotten that if it wasn't on the news in the last 20 minutes, that there's everything from all of the shenanigans with supposedly the Republicans seeking foreign aid to get Trump elected in the first place, and now the Democrats very much want to turn this into a case where we've got you red-handed this time. That's not clear at all. You don't hear over the past 2-3 weeks a whole lot about the seriousness that people place on Trump's possible emoluments clause infractions, using his position basically clearly to make money by having people stay at these hotels all over the world and that sort of thing as well. Haven't heard much lately about the corruption supposedly involved in campaign financing, and that's about half of the things.
That's the Michael Cohen thing.
Right. That's about half of what Democrats are talking about as possible impeachable offenses. And the other thing that I mentioned a minute ago as well is that you have these people in the opposition party, the Democrats, who are at least attempting to make these principled statements about how their positions as duly elected members of the House of Representatives place them in a position of having to check. Some of them are calling it a moral cause, which that's just a little disturbing to me. I'm speaking for myself, but we have a principled job to do here, and therefore we must move forward. And as we go in and out of talking about impeachment, you can't impeach anybody until you decide to do that, and an impeachment must rest on at least one article of impeachment, and they seem to be working on those, but once again, I have no idea at this point in time where they're headed with these 6 committees they've got doing various things.
Yeah. And the McGuire, who is the acting House.
No, he's the Director of National Intelligence.
Okay. Is he acting, or is he really?
He's the acting director,
acting.
because the former one left.
Right.
We think under pressure from Trump. He and President Trump disagreed about the interpretation of what is true and what isn't true. The intelligence agency said this is true, and Trump said no, it isn't, kind of a thing. So he's acting. The whistleblower went through the proper channels, and a complaint was filed with the Inspector General in the Intelligence Department.
Okay.
The Inspector General's, under the law, then informs the Director of National Intelligence, and the Director of National Intelligence says they did everything correctly, but the Inspector General said there was something wrong in the way that the whistleblower's account worked, maybe because he wasn't directly, or something. We don't quite know what, at least I don't quite know what it is that was incorrect. It didn't follow the form that it was supposed to follow in some way. And so it was not going to go anywhere. But then it got leaked, and that there in fact was a whistleblower. And according to the law, if it's a legitimate, that follows the form, the right form, then that information must be directed to Congress. So Chairman Schiff of the Intelligence Committee demanded to get the transcript and demanded to get the whistleblower's statement. And so now we've been thinking about this for a week.
And which leads us to the point in the unfolding drama where Donald Trump came perilously close to calling the whistleblower a spy. He stopped just short of
perilously close.
Yeah, I thought he did call him a spy.
Not.
No?
I haven't seen anything where he out and out called him a spy, but
This is what we do to them. We don't do. Yeah.
Wow. When McGuire was being interviewed, testifying yesterday for about 8 hours, I think it was, or 6 hours. He at the bottom line, he concluded. He said that the whistleblower did the right thing. He actually said that he agreed that he did the right thing. How do we interpret that? Does that mean that he says that maybe there is some substance to this as far as the accusation for impeachment?
I think he was speaking, I saw some of that. As much as anything, I think he was speaking to the fact that this is a very serious function and that there are at least a couple things to consider. One, if you're a serious government employee in one of those positions and you really think you have happened upon as big a problem as this individual seems to think he discovered, you need to report it. And the other part that really struck me was, once again, you're placing yourself, even when you're doing the right thing as prescribed by law, you're placing yourself in a very precarious situation when you start turning these people in, because look what's happening. It's your responsibility, but you're still risking a lot.
And the Intelligence Committee is demanding that he be outed and brought before their committee to testify.
You're saying the whistleblower?
The whistleblower.
Mm-hmm. I heard that this morning myself.
The whistleblower laws.
I thought that the law protected you.
Yeah, it does.
Now they're
if you're a whistleblower and you do things according to the right procedures, which this person did, your anonymity is supposed to be protected absolutely.
Yes.
But if they're going to make a case for impeachment, the Intelligence Committee is going to have to talk to this person and find out who it was that had actual knowledge, heard the phone call or whatever it is. And so they would do it behind closed doors, but as soon as that person stands up, takes the oath, states his name, and it get leaked.
Oh, terrible.
Well, because the whistleblower was offering his impressions. This is second and third hand stuff, and the reports based on what this individual thought he saw unfolding.
Okay, we're going to have to take a break, but we'll be right back. Professor Joe Green and Dr. Chip McLeod's here discussing the impeachment of the President of the United States. We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen.
We now return you to tips, topics, issues, and positions with Dr. Bob Oxley.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We're discussing the impeachment of Donald Trump, President of the United States, and all the ramifications that have transpired over the last 7 days. And we're trying to get our arms around this because it seems like every hour we're getting more and more information coming out. And we were talking about the whistleblower just before our break. In that I was of the impression that if you were a whistleblower, you were protected. And now there is some indication coming out indicating that possibly they want that whistleblower to testify and identify himself or herself before a committee. And to me, my impression of this is that defeats the whole idea of a whistleblower because he or she is going to be a nervous wreck because of the ramifications of them exposing the President of the United States.
There will be death threats, and his family will, all kinds of bad things will happen just because this is such a we're in the middle, right in the middle of a already fractious and antagonistic political divide in the country, and so he would I'll bet he doesn't want to testify.
This is not the way the other 3 impeachment scenarios have gone, which is almost certainly why, as we all know, the law is there, and then there's the law. You've got an individual who has come forward and is lending a hand, all things considered, to the possible impeachment of the President of the United States. So they're already bending the rules. This is not the normal way this has played out in the past. So this is not business as usual for whistleblowers.
Or for impeachment.
This
is supposed to be.
Precisely.
Historically, the whole House had to vote in order to even authorize an impeachment inquiry. But the Judiciary Committee, and as you mentioned some others too, but the Judiciary Committee especially, is calling what they're doing an impeachment inquiry without the permission of the Speaker or the leadership, initially at least.
Yeah.
And there has been no vote. And Speaker Pelosi has 30 members of her caucus who came in from what were Republican districts before. 15 of those people saw the initial report about this and signed a letter saying, yeah, we're on board with impeachment now, we'll go with you. But it doesn't look like she has enough votes to get the whole House to vote to authorize an impeachment inquiry. So instead she authorized it the other day. And even if she had the votes, we don't know if the leadership would want to expose their members that way, because if this is seen as a partisan, and it's already lining up that way.
And it is.
If it's seen as partisan. This is the Democrats going after a president they don't like. The Republicans are defending a president that they like. If there's not people from the Republican Party willing to vote for this, that exposes these 30 members, even if they've agreed that this is impeachable, and she would feel threatened that she would lose her majority if that happens. Now, we don't know if that's the case because we haven't had an election. We don't know if the American people are upset about this or not. If they're more concerned about getting the right person for health care, which is what they evidently voted for in 2018. And we don't know, maybe those California districts especially really are becoming less Republican and more Democratic, just like Virginia is. So it's she sees it as a risk.
And there's a huge question here, which is, of course, obviously what Joe was talking about. The question is, are we going to impeach the president? And they haven't answered that yet. They're still working in committees and playing the political posturing. And at the end of the day, politicians, no matter how well-meaning they are, don't usually rise to that level of political influence unless they care, often fairly deeply, about their electability. And part of their job is to go to whatever part of the legislature, in this instance, they seek a seat in and that sort of thing. And if something like this, no matter how principled they are, means they won't be reelected, then they have to figure that out, and they haven't yet. That's part of the problem.
And they're taking a 2-week vacation. Congress is. They're taking a 2-week break, so they're going back to their respective constituents. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of checking it out.
They're going to talk to people back in their respective states about not just Joe down at the local grocery store, but the power brokers and the people they need to commune with to get some sense of what they ought to do, and either they're going to impeach him or they're not.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. Also, during the 2-week period, I'm sure that the Democrats are going to turn it right up. They're going to turn the dial up in their own home.
Well, and nothing has been said, at least in our gathering here today, about the very great likelihood that impeaching the president would be that one thing with the approaching election to fire up his base as never before, because there are millions of Americans who still remain convinced that there's this maybe some sort of civilian deep state intent on taking the president they really want from them. That's a real sense in America of behind Trump supporters.
Yeah, all over on the right. There are people who believe that that people in the defense, in the intelligence agencies, have this sense of we're in charge of running this particular aspect of the government. We know what's best. And Mr. Trump came in with a sledgehammer, criticized them all over the place, and they don't like him. And they've been taking action since even before he became president to try to undermine his presidency. So that claim is that the intelligence agencies and the intelligence people in the FBI took this dossier that was paid for by the Democratic Party and the Clinton administration that had ties to Russia and used that to create the suspicion that Mr. Trump had interfered, used foreign sources to interfere in the election to help him get elected, and that all starts from the intelligence people, the people in the FBI and the people in the other intelligence agencies who don't like him. So that's deep state thinking, and it's all over on the right. And now this person has come out of the intelligence agencies. He's using his report is based on secondhand information. It looks to them like a setup, and you're right. So Chip's right. This could be something that really fires up the people who voted for him in Wisconsin, who've turned away from him. We'll get him back.
And Michigan.
And again, to further elaborate on something that is always under the surface with this, the idea among Trump's staunchest supporters that you're talking about, we'll call it, he likes to call these things hoaxes and witch hunts, and for the most part they seem to agree with that. It's not that our chief executive has done anything illegal, wrong, impeachable. You're making up all this stuff, and if there's any thread to pull that might implicate him, that's what you're all going for, because the real objective here is to undo an election you don't like.
Yeah.
Well, if we're it seems like a long time ago when we talked about the Russian investigation and his connection with Putin in Moscow, and then we went into Cambridge Analytica and Facebook and all of the others trying to manipulate the 2016 election. And that all reached a peak and it went away. Now here we are back again with impeachable.
The Ukraine thing holds some promise to reopen all of that, because there is a possible connection when it comes to tampering with what they fondly refer to as our democracy. That is, the ability of Americans to cast a vote and rest assured it will go where it's supposed to go, and that sort of thing. But and as I think we mentioned a minute ago, all the speculation, all the information, all the testimony, all the evidence, information collected in the Mueller report, and it was designed as much as anything to get what they needed in an investigation that people still don't agree about, but the orchestration, the dramatization the Democrats hoped for just turned out to be a huge dud. It didn't work the way they thought it was going to work, and now we can go back to that same kind of context with what's taking place in Ukraine. And again, there's no smoking gun. Donald Trump is not in anybody's transcript going, here's what I want you to do. Investigate these people, investigate the Biden family, and I will assure you that this money that we've promised you. And but it makes a good case in politics. They're just not proving the case yet.
But what is all over the conservative media is that this will hurt Joe Biden just by focusing the nation's attention on this transcript and on this charge, keeps bringing up Mr. Biden and his family in very negative ways, whether there's no evidence at all that anybody has that Hunter Biden did anything illegal, but
and don't forget,
it looks bad.
Not only is this instrumental in the approaching presidential election, but it's also another opportunity for really hardcore Republicans behind Trump to yell and scream again. Why are you doing this? We just mentioned the fact that we know what's up. You're still upset about the election. What you're trying to do is unseat a president, and the people you really ought to be investigating are, and it's a long list of Democrats, and Joe Biden is now on the list.
Yes.
Amazing. Well, Nancy Pelosi really tried to push back and did not want to do this until this came out, and she had to go along with what the majority of the Democratic Party wanted to go with.
There's a majority of House Democrats, and I've heard, I haven't had it confirmed, but I heard someone say that they thought that it's up to around, just 4 or 5 nests to go. I don't know where they are, but really close to having enough, to getting enough Democrats to vote for it. No Republicans, it looks like, are going to vote for it, to open an impeachment inquiry.
No, that would be pretty much tantamount to sending messages to all their constituents back home. Please don't reelect me.
Yeah.
There was, during the testimony by McGuire, I can't remember his name, but the representative from Ohio,
Jim Jordan.
he made the statement that there's something wrong here. I think he made that statement to McGuire, and they said, don't misconstrue this. There is something wrong here. So in other words, he gave some credibility to the impeachment process in some way, and he's a Republican.
Not if it was Jim Jordan.
No, this was...
Might have been a different Ohio guy, yeah.
He was part of the panel there.
Jim Jordan is he the? No, he's on the intelligence panel. He's
Yeah.
from Ohio, but there are a number of Ohio congressmen.
Okay. But he was actually he made the statement to McGuire. I'll have to.
Well, I don't recall seeing any analysis of the vote in the Senate to bring forward the transcript of the whole whistle-blowing phenomenon this time, and I'm not sure that everybody is giving that the credence and focus that it deserves. We kind of blew past that. I mean, it was unanimous, which means you got to have Republicans and Democrats. And my thinking, among other parts of this, is that either for a moment they got very serious about possible constitutional damage the president could be doing, or they really were confident there's nothing in it.
Yeah. Or Mr. Trump is not anything close to a traditional president. Doesn't behave like a traditional president. And many of the things that he does, especially the tweeting that he does, you've seen Republicans in the Senate and the House react to it. Well, I don't really agree with that. The president shouldn't be tweeting. He's doing the right thing, but he shouldn't be tweeting, that kind of thing. And so one interpretation could be, in the back of their minds, Mr. Trump seems not to have any controls. Okay, he just does what he thinks is going on right all of the time, and that often looks to lots of people in the United States like he's operating
his business.
Yeah,
He's a businessman.
But more than that he's like a child. He doesn't have impulse control, that kind of thing. So, is it possible that a Republican could think that the president could go to the president of Ukraine and have a discussion with him and imply that, boy, we want to find out about Hunter Biden. We think you should go take care of that, okay? Adam Schiff thinks that that's what the president was doing. He didn't have to mention it. It's like a mobster.
Yep,
know?
absolutely. Yep.
If you want our help from now on, wink, wink, you know what we'll do. So could it be that in the back of their minds, the Republicans are thinking he might have done it? And if he did, then we're in trouble with our constituents. So let's play our cards close to our chest and see where this goes and not commit too much, but we really got to be transparent.
Because the election's coming up 1 year from now.
But based on the transcript, I don't think.
And flexible, just in case he actually did something wrong, that he's going to be busted.
But the idea, is it conceivable Republican senators are thinking, might have happened? I think
so.
it's conceivable that they might, in the back of their minds, say, he doesn't, he's not, Pompeo's not in the room with him. He might have done it.
Well, and he was pretty enthusiastic once this came out about getting the transcript and that sort of thing, and I won't even pretend I have the least inkling as to what he was thinking about. Democrats wanted to depict this as you've been caught red-handed, here we go, let's get on with the impeachment, but he was very, very transparent, at least for Donald Trump. Yeah, take a look at it. And whether he thought he was just going to sidestep it or whether he was truly confident there was nothing in it that would get him in serious trouble, I don't claim to know anything about that.
Well, he's not surprising anyone the way he operates. And he operates from the presidency as if that's his Trump corporation. Moving forward.
But you and I have met business executives, and business executives are usually very reserved. They don't, this is a different person.
You're right. Yeah. My experience is nothing like Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I've never had that experience before, and the American people are having one heck of a time.
Well, and they are, to the extent that average Americans are paying any attention to this at all. There's always the sense that, gee, I wish it would go away, or people who are really tapped into the process are nervous about what could possibly happen here. Again, as we mentioned previously, if they come up with an article or two of impeachment that they can actually get 218 members of the House of Representatives to vote on, this could be a hugely divisive scenario here, especially this close to the election, because again, it's right out of page one of the political playbook. Of course, the Republicans are going to say there's not one single thing going on here but a bid to defeat Trump next year, and they are going to need something really concrete in order literally to put the country through this if they go for it. And he's not going to do anything should this transpire but push back the way he always does. And that would be interesting to watch, but he's certainly not going to Richard Nixon it. He's not going away.
Yeah. Well, what's after 2 weeks break, Congress comes back, reconvenes. What's the next step? What's going to happen next? Do we have you were mentioning about a vote in the House? Is that what's next? Or?
She didn't schedule a vote.
Right.
That's what
Wow.
that was what was interesting about the way this played out.
Yeah.
So basically, they'll come back and those committees will do their investigations. The one to watch will be the Nadler committee and the Intelligence Committee. The Intelligence Committee is going to start looking at things too, and they'll start calling witnesses. But I don't know who they can call if they can't get the whistleblower to come and say, "Who did you talk to?"
And we've talked about that. I mean, the idea was that's a whistleblower. You don't have to let people know who you are. This is terrible.
This is not a standard scenario, and whether you love or hate incredibly powerful politicians or you fall somewhere in the middle of the continuum or what have you, Nancy Pelosi will certainly go down as, whether you agree with her or stand behind her or anything, as one savvy politician. She's not going to jump into the deep end of the pool on this. She's just not going to do that.
Wow.
She respects the process, it's my sense of it, and she realizes what road we're going to go down if we call for a vote and impeach this guy.
She wants to protect her majority.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what her concern was when this popped out. She didn't just jump. She took a careful look in the transcript. Now, she made the statement subsequent to getting the transcript. Is that right? Am I right in the sequence?
Right.
Okay.
But she's getting huge pressure from the majority of her caucus who want President Trump impeached. They want to go through with it. They promised their constituents they would do it. They're going home and telling their constituents we're finally delivering on, okay? So it's a balancing act that she has to do between her, the minority of her caucus that gives her a majority who don't want to get too near to this, and the majority of her caucus who are very progressive who want this to happen. This is what they promised that they would, in the last election, that they would do.
And the really enthusiastic spin meisters, if you will, on the Republican side of the equation want to tell the story, and most effectively if they can get as many Americans as possible to believe that what we have here is a bunch of nutcase radical Democrats who want to derail the presidency.
Yeah.
That's a story that's being told every day now. There's nothing substantive here. They just want to, oust this guy. And I think his supporters are very sensitive to that. We've never seen anything like this before.
This is interesting. This is really interesting.
Absent any revelation
Right.
that shows the president's actions being an actual crime, okay, not implied and all of that, there will be no conviction even if you do impeach.
That would be the Senate.
Yeah.
So we can go through all this.
And we don't want to do that, I don't think, no matter how, unless there's just something so hideous, so heinous, so horrific he's pulled that can be proved beyond the shadow of a doubt. It would be the worst thing the country's experienced in a lot since the Civil War, maybe. We're going to convict the president, kick him out of office, embarrass our republic, have people all over the world see you elect crooks and you're corrupt, and then Mike Pence becomes president, and that's another show.
That's another show for November of next year. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this issue of Tips, Topics, Issues, and Positions. I want to thank Professor Joe Green and Dr. Chip McLeod for being here today and giving us some updates and some great information about this impeachment process that President Trump is going through right now. And in about 2 weeks when Congress reconvenes, it'll be a very interesting story as time continues. We'll probably have you two back. Give us updates as we move forward. Until next time, this is Bob Oxley saying goodbye. Have a good week.
You've been listening to Dr. Bob Oxley with tips, topics, issues, and positions. For video and/or audio of this, go to Podbean or Spotify, YouTube or Facebook, and search Radio St. George. or radiostgeorge.com. Until next week, this has been Bob Oxley with Tips on Radio St. George 100.3 FM.